In 1973, you could buy a whole pint of milk for just 9.5 old pence. Adjusted for inflation, it would be about 51 pence today. But in real terms, that pint cost far less than what we pay now. That wasn't unusual. In fact, that was just one of many grocery prices that were once unbelievably cheap. A time when a hearty breakfast, a week's worth of bread, or even a nice block of cheese barely scratched the budget. But how could prices be so low? And why do they feel so far out of reach today? In this video, we'll take you back to the 1960s and 1970s, revisiting 20 grocery items that were so affordable, you might think we're making them up. From bacon to baked beans, bread to bananas, everyday essentials were once within every family's grasp. Make sure to give this video a like if it sparks any memories, and subscribe for more journeys into the past. Now, let's turn the clock back and see just how different shopping for food really used to be. Before 1971, British money was a whole different beast. Pounds, shillings, and pence ruled the tills. There were 12 pence in a shilling and 20 shillings in a pound. That made for 240 pence in 1 pound. So when someone said a loaf of bread cost 1 shilling and 3 pence, they meant it cost 15 old pence, which equals about 6 pence in decimal currency. It may sound like a maths lesson now, but for older generations, this quirky currency was just part of daily life. Now that we're all decimalized, it's easy to forget how small those amounts were and just how much value they gave you back then. Milk was the quiet hero of every kitchen. Delivered in clinking glass bottles left on doorsteps at dawn, it cost just 9.5 old pennies, or 9.5d in the 1960s. That's less than 4 pence in today's decimal money. It was fresh, locally sourced, and often came with a thick layer of cream at the top if left to settle. Milk wasn't just a drink, it went in tea, bathed cereal, or warmed at night for comfort. Today, that same pint would set you back nearly a pound. It's hard to believe we ever got it for a handful of copper coins. A loaf of white bread was a daily essential. Fluffy inside with a golden crust. It cost just 10 pence in 1970. For that, you got a full-sized bakery fresh loaf, warm and smelling of yeast. It was sliced thin for sandwiches, thick for toast, and sometimes left to go stale for bread pudding. There was no plastic wrap, no preservatives, just pure simplicity. Bread was bought almost daily because it was so affordable and also because it was perishable. In today's economy, the same loaf could easily cost over 10 times as much and somehow feel less satisfying. A dozen large eggs could be bought for 14 pence in the early 1970s, which is almost a pence for an egg. They were brown, farm fresh, and came in simple cardboard cartons. No organic branding, no size confusion. Just eggs from local hens, often collected the same day. They scrambled into breakfast, coated Sunday roasts with Yorkshire batter, and thickened sponges for birthday cakes. Eggs were versatile and dependable, and most homes kept a bowl of them out on the counter. Today, a dozen good quality eggs can cost nearly 15 times that. But back then, they were just another humble staple. Butter, not margarine, was the crown jewel of toast and crumpets in the 60s. A full pound cost 3 shillings and 5 pence, just 0.08 in decimal money. And this wasn't the tasteless block we sometimes find today. This was rich, golden, and hand-wrapped in foil with pride. It melted beautifully and gave every dish, from short crust pastry to buttery peas, a distinct flavor. Most butter came from local dairies and didn't travel far. In today's world, the same pound could cost up to £3, and you'd be lucky if it wasn't bulked out with palm oil. Sugar was everywhere in the British home, poured generously into tea, baked into pies, and sprinkled onto buttered bread as a treat. A pound of white, granulated sugar in the 1960s cost just 7 old pence, or 3 pence in today's decimal system. Families bought it in big bags and stored it in biscuit tins or glass jars. No one counted teaspoons. The word calories was far less common in public conversation. Today, a similar bag costs over £1 and often comes with guilt attached. But back then, sugar wasn't just affordable. It was a source of everyday joy. Potatoes were the meal stretcher of British families. For only 3 shillings, which was about 6 pence, you could walk away with a full £5 bag. That could make mash, chips, roasties, or hearty stews for the whole week. There were no plastic net bags or triple-washed gimmicks. Often the spuds came in a sack still covered in mud, straight from a local farm or market stall. Housewives knew their names, King Edward, Maris Piper, and cooked them to perfection. Now, you'll pay more for half the amount, and chances are they won't taste quite the same. British sausages in the early 60s were the definition of comfort food. Plump, peppery, and made by the butcher, a pound of bangers cost 4 shillings and 6 pence, just 0.07 pounds. Sausages weren't factory stuffed with filler. They had texture and sizzle and filled a kitchen with the kind of smell that made kids race to the table. Whether with mash and gravy or slipped into a crispy bap, they were Sunday lunch or midweek treats. Today's pre-packed sausages can feel like a poor imitation, costing 10 times more but offering half the soul. A healthy snack before superfoods became a thing, apples were in every lunchbox and fruit bowl. In 1960, a pound of apples, about 3 to 4 good-sized fruits, cost just 20 old pence, about 8 new pence. And these are the dessert eating apples we're talking about, not the cooking ones. Whether Bramleys for cooking or Cox's orange pippins for crunching, apples were grown widely across the UK and available at markets, greengrocers, and milk rounds. Nowadays, you're lucky to find a bag under £1.50, but back then, they were as normal and necessary as bread. That sweet, crisp bite connected generations, and all for pennies. Fish on a budget? Sardines were the answer. In the early 70s, a tin cost barely over 7 pence. Stored in olive oil or tomato sauce, they were easy to keep and even easier to serve, on toast, in salads, or straight from the tin. For many families, they were a source of protein when fresh fish was too expensive. Today, tinned fish has made a culinary comeback, but prices have followed suit. Back then, sardines weren't a hip cafe topping. They were a humble helper in tough times, when frugality and nutrition had to go hand in hand. A large bunch of carrots, often with the top still on, cost a mere 3 pence at the local greengrocer in the 1970s. Back then, carrots were dirt cheap and proudly British grown. They were a favorite in soups and stews, or simply boiled and buttered for Sunday roast. If you had a rabbit as a pet, they'd share in your bounty. There was no plastic packaging or barcode stickers, just loose produce, weighed and wrapped in paper. It was a time when seasonality mattered and buying local wasn't trendy. It was just what you did. You could get a full pound of back bacon for just 25 pence, a breakfast staple that many families enjoyed regularly. Fried up in lard and served with eggs, beans and toast, bacon was central to the classic full English breakfast. It was bought from the butcher, sliced fresh, and wrapped in waxed paper, still warm from the counter. There were no plastic packs or smoked applewood glaze varieties, just pork, salt, and simplicity. A full breakfast cost pennies, but it filled you for hours. And in a time when food waste was a sin, every rind was used for gravy or broth. Minced beef was one of the most budget-friendly meats, costing just 40 pence per pound. It was the backbone of cottage pies, spaghetti bolognese, and homemade burgers long before drive-thrus existed. Butchers ground it fresh, and families stretched it with breadcrumbs, oats, or even grated carrots to feed more mouths. This was the kind of resourcefulness learned during the war and carried into the next generation. Dinners were filling, not fancy. A pot of mince simmering on the stove signaled comfort, and sometimes payday. Today, even the cheapest mince costs more than triple that price. Back then, it was everyday food done right. A full chicken, ready for roasting, stewing, or boiling, cost just 72 pence in the early 70s. Roast dinners on Sunday were more than tradition. They were an affordable weekly feast. The bird would stretch across multiple meals: cold slices for Monday sandwiches, boiled bones for Tuesday soup. No shrink-wrapped trays or flavor injections, just a raw chicken from the butcher, trussed with string and handed over the counter with a smile. Housewives knew how to use every part, and nothing went to waste. That level of thrift and that price tag seem like a fairy tale today, but back then it was simply life. Tea wasn't just a drink, it was a ritual, a pause, and a comfort rolled into one. A pound of loose leaf tea cost just under 50 pence, filling a family's teapot for weeks. Families gathered around the kitchen table, pouring steaming cups with milk and a lump of sugar. It wasn't fancy or branded with exotic origins, just good, strong black tea that warmed souls. The kettle was always on the boil, ready to offer solace from rain or weariness. Today, tea comes in countless blends and prices, but back then it was simple, dependable, and always part of home. A pint of cooking oil was a valuable find for just 40 pence, often reserved for Sunday roasts or special occasions. Vegetable oils were simpler then. No fancy blends or cold-pressed labels, just essential fat for frying, baking, and salad dressings. When oil was scarce or expensive, home cooks improvised with dripping or bacon fat. The bottle was heavy glass, the label straightforward. Having oil in the cupboard meant you could cook more than just boiled vegetables. It meant variety and flavor. It was a small luxury in a thrifty kitchen. Marmalade was a breakfast staple, its tangy bitterness loved by many. A jar weighing about a pound cost roughly 25 pence. It came in thick glass pots, often with homemade labels, and was spread generously on buttered toast. Seville oranges were the secret, and the peel's sharp bite was a morning pick-me-up. Mothers made it from scratch or bought it from trusted brands like Robertson's. Marmalade wasn't just jam, it was tradition and thrift. It lasted for weeks, and a spoonful could brighten even the dullest of mornings. Flour was the backbone of any kitchen and cost less than a dime for a kilogram. It was the starting point for everything from bread and cakes to sauces and batters. Bags were simple brown paper, no fancy branding needed. Housewives measured, sieved, and kneaded it with practiced hands, knowing flour could transform humble ingredients into hearty meals. Self-raising and plain flour weren't as widely varied as today. One bag did all. The smell of freshly baked bread was a daily comfort, and flour dusted the kitchen like a promise of good things to come. A whole cabbage cost mere pennies, but was a powerhouse vegetable. Served boiled in stews or as coleslaw, it filled plates and warmed stomachs. Farmers' markets and greengrocers stocked fresh, locally grown heads wrapped loosely in leaves. Cabbage was cheap, nutritious, and versatile, perfect for filling out meals when meat was scarce. Its presence on the table was a reminder of simpler times, when food was seasonal and hearty. It might not be glamorous, but cabbage was a reliable friend in many British kitchens. Baked beans were the ultimate convenience food that barely cost a penny. A tin of Heinz beans was a kitchen hero, quick to open, filling to eat, and versatile enough to appear on toast, with eggs, or as a side. Canned foods were gaining popularity, making life easier for busy families. Though today's prices have soared, back then beans were a cheap, nutritious staple, providing warmth and satisfaction in simple meals. The iconic red and white label was a symbol of reliability and modest culinary pleasure. Salt was the silent star of the kitchen, costing almost nothing but playing a crucial role. Whether seasoning stews, preserving pickles, or baking bread, it was always within reach. Sold in plain paper sacks or simple boxes, salt was so common it was nearly invisible until it was missing. Housewives used it sparingly but smartly, knowing it could transform bland dishes into something memorable. At 5 pence a pound, salt was cheap, but invaluable. It was a humble ingredient that anchored countless meals, quietly indispensable in the fabric of home cooking. And that's it for today's trip down memory lane. Give it a like if it brought back the flavor of the past, and don't forget to subscribe for more delicious nostalgia. See you next time.